The Star Citizen Addicts Anonymous, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about ship design in Star Citizen. And I'm going to begin with the latest addition to our hangars, the Vanguard. Alright, let's go and start picking this thing apart as I did on my last show. First off, I'm a proponent of Chris Roberts' idea of trying to make things a little bit more fun and much more, a much more social experience in this game. So in that respect, he's looking at the designs of the ships to be something of, something out of World War II's era, where they did have turrets and stations that were manned by people. Well, turrets that were manned by people. One of the problems with that is turrets were good, but they weren't effective at defending the aircraft. At least not until the B-29, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. The B-29 had quite a unique turret structure, and hopefully I'll be able to pull some pictures and show you what that was. But in the Star Citizen universe, we're very quickly feeling the same issues that they did in World War II. Now, in World War II, things were different. The planes flew straight and level. They didn't evade, and even when they weren't evading and when they were flying straight and level, the people manning the guns, manning the turrets, did have a very hard time of hitting a target, specifically in the top and bottom turrets on the B-17s, B-24s, and the, I guess the Lancasters and Sterling bombers. I don't say anything about a Wellington because that flying piece of wood would normally just get knocked out, which is why they flew mostly at night. Here in Star Citizen, we're jinking and maneuvering and trying to evade quite wildly when somebody's on our tail, which is making it even harder for somebody in a turret to actually hit something, because we're not flying straight and level, and we're not flying in large groups where you could have that cross fire that you would have, or the large fields of fire that you would have in a big giant box formation of B-17s. Okay, so let's look at something else. I'm very critical of this piece on every single one of the Aegis Dynamics spacecraft, mainly for the reason that, you want to be realistic, but you're hanging a big-ass gun underneath the nose on a little pin. And yes, I believe that, like, nanofiber and other materials 1,000 years in the future are going to be much stronger and able to handle that. But it just looks off, and I am going to say this again, it's probably just mounted this way for the Care Bears that use mouse and keyboard. And yes, you can ridicule me and yell at me and curse me out for saying that, but, I'm not really a person that thinks that there shouldn't be mouse and keyboard in there, but I think that some elements shouldn't be made specifically for that. There are going to be some spacecraft with fixed weapons, and some with gimbaled weapons, but I think something this big really needs to be housed in the nose. But the fact that they make up for it by putting those 4 huge cannons in the nose for us, for those of us that use the joystick, I pretty much like that. But this, unrealistic. Alright, I've beaten this down a lot, or just a little bit in the end of the last video about swing wings, and we're going to go from this spacecraft to another one in just a few moments. But swing wings are primarily given to aircraft that need to have a much broader flight profile, something that's heavy and needs to slow down and land at a very slow speed. The F-111s were theoretically going to be working from ill-prepared bases in Europe if we went to war with Russia, and thus they had the swing wings so they could land on shorter bases. And the F-14s had swing wings because they were big and heavy and fast, but needed to be maneuverable at low speeds, so they would crop the wing back and forward to get better lift characteristics at low speed, and swing the wings all the way forward to be able to put out all those flaps and spoilers and, and air fences to be able to land on the carrier at an acceptable speed. If you have any questions about that, go back and watch Top Gun. It was a wonderful way to explain how swing wings were used in the different modes. But to swing all the way forward like the wings do in this game, it does mean that maybe you are going to be landing on wheels, like landing on a runway. Now, the whole basis of this ship over here and the Retaliator is that it's able to work off of forward bases and strike further than our carriers could strike. I agree. There is VTOL in the Star Citizen universe. There's not VTOL on this spacecraft. So we have skids, which big freaking deal that they're skids, right? Who cares? I honestly, take it with a grain of salt. This is just being constructively critical of designs, okay? And that is something that I hope CIG opens up their eyes and looks at. Otherwise, why give us ships in these different states and keep changing them if they're not going to listen to what we have to say, right? But these really theoretically should be wheels if that's what they're going to be doing. Now, if they make them wheels, great. If they don't make them wheels, who cares? So the wings being, well, the missiles being hung under the wings like this over here, I believe there should be bays for the missiles. And you should be able to rearm them at least once on a long-range fighter like this. But in the grand scheme of things, this is the least of my criticisms. But yeah, they could be, it would be better if they were at least on, in bays. You could put a couple of hard points out here, which the F-111 had, and they actually swung with the wing. They pivoted as the wing pivoted. And you could put some torpedoes on here if you wanted to. This is not the stealthy ship. This is the Vanguard. The Sabre is the stealthy ship, okay? So let's go around the back. You don't see any VTOL jets on this whatsoever, and that's what I'm saying. There's no thrust vectoring, and maneuvering jets are going to be able to maneuver the ship in space where there is no gravity, but on, coming into land, I don't see how that's going to be the case inside of on a planet with gravity anywhere within 60% of Earth's or above. All right, this is my second pet peeve. In the military, this is a military fighter, not civilian, military fighter. This is a huge waste of space, okay? Military spacecraft, and spacecraft will probably be more or less designed around submarine technology. This is a huge waste of space. This could be an area where you actually have maybe just a little tiny elevator that brings you up into this instead of this ramp, which, yeah, the ramp could make sense. I'm not going to knock it too much. But this is just a huge waste of space. And then we come in here. First off, there's way too much freaking mist in here, and I understand why they put it in. It kind of dulls out the textures to give a more realistic appearance, but this is way too much. But this is the biggest waste of space that there is in the ship. I mean, this right here, you have all this space over here. Put the armory over here and over here. You have places to sleep, which in space, right? These could be vertically like they are on the space shuttle. And with the way that they have gravitation plates and stuff, you could actually have the gravity changed inside of these to be more or less up and, fixed. So when it was up and down, it would work. Up and down would also be a better way to get in there and jump in. You wouldn't have to climb in. You'd just walk right in, and then they would fall out the bottom when you had to escape the ship really fast. The locker over here also makes absolutely no sense. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But this has a capacity of 3 people, and you have 2 escape pods. Does that mean this area up here is an escape pod? If it is, put another door right here, and let the nose attach like it did on the F-111 Aardvark. This also is a big waste of space, and I'll put some pictures up in a little bit about how space is better managed inside of these ships. Let's go up here. Right, we're going up into the turret. I am a big proponent of stealing parts of one spacecraft to put on another. This is the turret from the Retaliator, which is okay, but it really doesn't have that visibility when you go up or when you go down that you need. Big deal. But where they put it, you have great forward firing arcs, you have okay side firing arcs, and you have great rear firing arcs. If the spacecraft is flying straight and level, I believe that this will be a great, absolutely wonderful turret to use. But when you're jinking and maneuvering, I think that there's going... This would have been a better automatic turret, and we'll get back into that in just a little bit. Okay, let's get out of here. Let's go back to the outside. Alright, so again, not so bad. I have absolutely nothing to pick on about the cockpit. I think it's done well. I think that they will fix the HUD and they'll fix the nav ball. This is just an initial piece. I think that this needs to be an ejection seat, okay, because there's a lot of times that this guy won't be able to come back here, get through here, and get into here. But he will be able to eject and then EVA out over to this and then get back in. That is something that can happen. And of course, who's going to pick on the bathroom? We always complain that a ship is missing a bathroom. We got one here. Again, these lockers over here, I think that they could be moved over here. And over here you can put a little dining area or a place to sit down, or more, maybe another one of these standing up for the third crew member. Or maybe something that comes down for them to actually sit and eat. And who cares about them sitting and eating, right? They're in a military vessel. That really wouldn't be the case. They'd sit wherever they could, but there should be pop-out seats somewhere for them to sit down for just a couple of seconds. Again, who cares? It's just talking about design and design only. The ship design as a whole, I'm sorry folks, I absolutely love it. I think that this is an amazing looking ship. I'm not disappointed in the design of it, the exterior. I think it holds true with that Aegis design spec. And I am not going to pick on this ship anymore. I think that there's a lot of love that I have for this ship. I just think that, wow, these could be right here, right here. 1 missile bay, 2 missile bays. You can do that, but I know it's the intake or something, but that would be great. All right, my understanding is that these are engines that work in space and in atmosphere, and in atmosphere they'll be sucking air. These up here, I expect them to be the coolers to cool our heat on the system, and you got quite a number of them. And again, it has a massive amount of firepower on it. And you can carry torpedoes in many different places. So I'm sure that this design will be fleshed out over time. So that's the criticism I have for it right now. Now let's end here and go into a ship that I feel is designed wonderfully. Alright folks, in part 2 of it, we're going to be here inside of the hangar. And I'm going to talk about some ships that I think have a wonderful design. This is the latest design from Aegis Dynamics. It's a ship that is going to be competing with the Hornet for that medium fighter role. For those of you that actually read through the lore, you'll read through the lore inside of one of the jump points, and you can go back. Most of them have already been put up into the comlink. And you'll see that the Hornet is a design that's reaching 100 years old. Wow, that's a lot, right? But not really. We have B-52s that were built in the 50s and 60s that are still in today's U.S. arsenal. So this design, why do I like it? It's just a very sleek and stealthy design, which is what this is supposed to be. Only criticism I could have of this is that they call it a stealthy design, but they have these big-ass panthers on the sides. I say big deal. And again, I could talk about the swing wings and the landing gear, but I think I've beaten that horse. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. But if they're going to say that it lands vertically, it should have some kind of VTOL jets on it. It doesn't, and again, big deal. I do think this is a ship that could carry a couple more weapons under the wings, and they should look at the F-111. You could have them on swiveling mounts over here. You have a lot of room for missiles on each wing. I wonder where they keep them. Is this the one that keeps them in a bay? Haven't been able to see it. I'll probably have to bring it out for a flight one day to see that. I think there's a bay in here, right? Could almost make it out right in there. Okay. So that's one of my favorite designs. We're going to go through 3, and then we're going to go into one of the interiors that I think is the best designed interior in the game yet. This is absolutely the best design of a military spacecraft. It is a spacecraft that can fly in atmosphere. The only one design flaw here is the elevator, which does not have enough room to fully deflect up and down because of where they put it. It's a space game, who cares, but if it ever did have to fly in atmosphere and they were accurately modeling the physics of flight, you would not be able to fully deflect that elevator. Remember, something that's moving fast needs a full flying elevator, which means the whole thing would be pivoting. And I'm not sure they actually built that in here, did they? Yeah, it doesn't look like this is a fully pivoting one. It just has little elevator pieces at the back, which is how they used to build these things. But if you look at F-22s and things, they have fully deflecting ones, and these would be like the trims or something else on them. But everything about this design, including the cockpit, works for me. Even the larger than normal jets over here, but it's a very light fighter, I could almost believe that these would be able to put out enough thrust to settle this down on the tarmac pretty easily. And again, here's the big ass gun that I believe should be inside of a housing, but we got to leave it gimbaled for the people that use mouse and keyboard, so they could unrealistically keep the gun on the target all the time. Guys, in actuality, I'm just jealous of how good that people in mouse and keyboard are over me. I know that there are joystick players that are just as good, and I'm sure I will get better over time. So please heed this. When I say Care Bears and I make fun of mouse and keyboard, I'm not really doing it. I'm just pointing out some features that may be there for them that aren't there for everyone else. This is a Anvil design. It is a Gladiator. Again, I think this is one of the best designs militarily in the game. Everything from the Bombay to the Popular Science magazine that pointed out at where everything went in this ship. This over here, as much as I was saying the other ones are top, this is the top military design that I feel is in the game. Yeah, go over and look at the Hornet. I could tear up different pieces of that. The Hornet is a beautiful ship, and I wouldn't have it if it wasn't that. But I think this one makes sense. And guess what? Here's the VTOL jets right here. Right here. And the maneuvering jets and other parts of the ship would hold it steady. They would have a couple of jets up here in the nose and a couple in the tail to keep it steady, and some out on the wings to keep it from rolling. But that's something they could always add in there if they wanted to, but they really don't need to. They've already checked the boxes for these, right? But right now with those over there and these down, this thing would be rolling crazily. So let's go inside of a ship that I think has the design of a military type vessel right. Now remember, in space, we're not going to be making things like a ship that goes over the seas with big giant compartments and everything, but you can be making it like a submarine, and every compartment is going to be watertight, and you're going to have a double hull design. Why? Because you need to protect the crew. You need to protect what's inside of it. And the Retaliator, which I believe was co-designed with quite a number of people, but Foundry 42 put a lot of hard work into this. This is the best interior design in the game yet. And of course, the Constellation, the Freelancer have been brought up to this, and we have not seen, personally, I have not seen the Starfarer yet, but I will as soon as it comes out. But this makes sense. A central area for people to come into. Okay? Everything is cut into different pieces. I go through here, and that should close, does it? It closes. See, right behind me? I go into here. Watertight door closes behind me, or airtight door. I have my station. I come back out here. It's using the hallway for my lockers and all the different pieces out here, right? Again, a door that opens and closes here, a door that opens and closes here, and I go up into the turret. Come back out, more lockers. I have a doorway back here to access the engine controls. Again, another area where something could be spaced. 2 airtight doors, back through again, more lockers. Okay, more lockers, a place to go. And they utilize the space very well, extremely well. Extremely well. Alright, we go back over here. This is where the people would go to the bathroom and shower. Very well used space. Okay, lockers in here too. It's airtight. We can go in here. The bay, airtight. You can come in here, work, get things done, come back out of the bay, come around. Airtight doors. They could have put lockers in here or armor. Yeah, they did. They put lockers in here. They could have put weapons bays in here, whatever they wanted to. And then we go upstairs. And there should be doors that close here and here. I'm not sure if they are. So you got a place where all your munitions are before you go into another area of the ship, which is where all the crew sleeps. Again, in the military, you'd be probably on longer range flights. You'd be eating out of the food paste bags, the Shanks paste that we all eat in the enablers. Let's go down here. Alright, and finally the cockpit, which I feel is done very well. Let's go into the bottom turret, one of the best bottom turrets I feel that's in the game. You come into it, and you go upside down, and you go down. And you feel like you're right side up, even though your head is upside down. And again, it's the same turret as is on the Vanguard. So this is an amazingly designed ship. And I think that it could have been a tad bit better, but it's wonderful. You know, these large areas, like the cockpit area over here, again, I feel like the cockpit area should be its own survival pod for the pilot, because it's going to be very difficult for him to get out, up the stairs, and back and into his area if they're getting blown up. And in this area, again, this is where the captain sleeps. Very, very, very tight space. Small rack. Way too small. I guess the guy's about 4'4" or 4'5". And things that make sense in here. Okay? On ships like this, and on the Vanguard, I do feel like you could put the escape pods / beds standing up. I'm sure it wouldn't be hard for them to manipulate gravity and those things for you to feel like you were sleeping. But I think that's a wonderful thing. Let's get back through here, fall down, boom. And that's the end. You know, that was pretty cool, right? I like this ship inside more than any other ship. Alright, so let's go this way. All of a sudden, I've got this helmet. I'm like EVAing. Ships that make sense. Okay? That design makes sense over there. And of course, we're right back to the center again. So this will be the end of this piece, and I'm going to go back in and I'm going to start looking at some of the other pieces that I wanted to show you, primarily about the turrets. Alright, in this next part, I'm just going to look at some World War II aircraft and talk about how the turrets worked here. We're going to start off with the very basic B-17, okay? Fields of fire. They had waist gunners. The navigator had a gun that fired up. These guys had a couple of guns that they could fire out of it, but they weren't very effective. There was a ball turret for people, you know, for any kind of attack from below. And the real star of the show was a tail gunner. You never locked onto the tail of a B-17 because these were accurate, and these guys were usually the top gunners on the plane. Nonetheless, as many of these that had flown, most of the kills were from this particular turret, and not so much from the top turret up here, or the ball turret on the bottom. And that's because when somebody was making a pass at the plane from behind, they were flying very straight and easy for them to fire at. So what the Germans started to do was started to attack it from the one place where it didn't have that much protection, and that was from dead on the front. The turret was not very accurate because it couldn't fire down over the nose, and the ball turret wasn't very accurate because it couldn't fire up over the nose. So what did we do about that? That's a good question, right? In comes the B-17G. B-17G made up for this and took away another angle of attack from the Germans and put this chin turret with twin 50s on it. And the chin turret turned out to be highly effective. And the chin turret was remotely operated by somebody inside here. Okay, so you start talking about remote, right? You start talking about remote turrets now. And of course, all the stations on the G were updated a little bit better with better fields of view, bulletproof glass, and other protection for the people that were in that area. But still, in this situation, the tail gunner and now the chin turret gunner were the most effective. Well, let's move forward a few years when they started to realize that these turrets weren't really as good as they thought. Well, what happened? What came out next? Well, of course, the B-29. None of these turrets are manned. Look at that. But these turrets were so much more capable of engaging aircraft. You have two in the back. See the tail gunner and one firing down behind. You have one on top here, one on top here, and one below. Now there was a very, very, very cool way that these guys actually were able to engage. So if a plane was coming from this direction, okay, so say you got an aircraft coming from this direction, one of the gunners here would have control, and they'd be looking at the blisters over here, and they'd be firing in that direction. Well, guess what? They'd be firing this weapon and this weapon and this weapon at this direction, and you would have fields of fire coming from 3 turrets all at once being controlled by this one person or this one person over here. Say it was coming from the front, right? You'd have a guy in the blister turret or in the bombardier's compartment manning this turret over here and this turret over here that would be firing in this field, from this direction over here. And again, you had this gentleman over here that was in the tail gunner spot firing this, but it would also activate this turret over here. Say if the guy was coming from below, he could keep his eyes on him, he could actually fire on him. So this was the first time that this type of turret use was used. In fact, I believe it was used on the P-63 Black Widow also. They were remote turrets. We're putting manned turrets on the ships in Star Citizen because Chris Roberts wants this to be a social experience. I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think keeping this a social experience is a very important part of why I want to be in this game, but not at the expense of gameplay. If Star Citizen would start designing some of the aircraft, or spacecraft in this instance, with the design elements that we learned by the end of World War II, so you're talking about 1944, 1945, and kept using all the way through the B-52, which has a remote tail gunner, a remote turret on the tail, I think that we would be able to have a better experience trying to use turrets in the game. Sure, put us in a blister like this, or use some advanced technology that shows us outside the ship what we're firing at, and then use some kind of software that points our guns in that direction. I think that would be a better situation. Well, let's see if this was used by any other nation. Okay, so let's go back in here. Let's look and see what the British have. Okay, British don't have great bombers, but let's go to the best one in their tree, which is the Lancaster bomber. Again, all turrets, and 7.92s not very effective. That's why these flew at night. But again, They flew at night because they couldn't fly in the daytime because turrets do not protect you against fighters. They deter fighters from attacking you from certain directions like the tail or the nose on the B-17, but they don't take the fighters out. However, on the B-29, the turrets were not just effective, they were deadly. So that is what I wanted to bring to you today. Let's go back to the B-29 as I close this out. B-29. Actually, I'm going to go to this. I think this had a tail gunner, and I think it was remote. No, they took it off here. This has absolutely no... they started using speed as a defensive weapon with the jet bombers, but they don't have the B-36 in this game, which would be... Well, they wouldn't have a runway big enough inside of War Thunder for it to land on. But just to come back here again. Tail gunner. Gunners and blisters. Bombardier. Remote turrets. That's what my proposition is for Star Citizen. Not to go back and redesign everything that's out there. I think it's good, right? But I think that we should get back into the thought process that we can have things like this. Let's look at those remote turrets as possibilities. They give a sleeker look to the spaceship. That's what they would do, and they would save space on the spaceship also. So that's my positioning for this particular day. The interior of the ships, that was the other piece I wanted to put up, and I'll probably extract my video from this here. Should be more like some submarine design, and I'm going to put some pictures up here for you right now. Submarines use every square inch of space for everything, for storage, for equipment, for sleeping, for eating, for munitions, for spare parts, for everything, right? So there isn't a single inch of space that's wasted on a submarine. And that, again, is something else that I think that Star Citizen should start doing, especially inside of the military vessels. Having these big, wide open spaces, having these huge ladders would never, ever be in a military ship. Military is more conservative. They want to use every square inch of space and make things as efficient and effective as possible. Well, folks, I'm going to leave on that note. I hope you like this video, and if you do, please click the thumbs up button. Be sure to share it. If you're a member of the Star Citizen community, be sure to give it an upvote in the hub. And with that said, you all be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.